What an unusual story we have developing at the University of Kentucky. UK basketball coach John Calipari, he woke up Thursday in the Bahamas and decided he wanted to publicly campaign for a brand new practice facility for his program. He talked with the Athletics' Kyle Tucker, and after detailing how the school has invested in football and baseball and lots of other sports, John Calipari, he said the following, quote, "This is a basketball school. It's always been that. Alabama's a football school. So is Georgia. I mean, they are. No disrespect to our football team. I hope they win 10 games and go to bowls. At the end of the day, that makes my job easier, and it makes the job of all of us easier. But this is a basketball school, and so we need to keep moving in that direction and keep doing what we're doing," end quote. Now, like I wrote in a column that published Thursday night, CBSSports.com, those words didn't really even make me flinch. Like, I understood the point Cal was making. I think he's largely right, but the UK football staff took offense. Less than 2 hours after the story published, Kentucky football coach Mark Stoops, he jumped on Twitter. He typed, "Basketball school? I thought we competed in the SEC. Hashtag 4 straight postseason wins." Worth noting, the Kentucky basketball program has 0 postseason wins since 2019. After that, this is where it got really interesting. Somebody tweeted that UK's football program has had more success lately than UK's basketball program. Mark Stoops retweeted it. Then somebody tweeted that Cal's comments were insulting. Mark Stoops retweeted that. I don't remember one coach at a school ever clapping back at another coach at the same school in such a public way. Adam, what did you make of Mark Stoops coming for John Calipari's throat on Twitter Thursday?
I mean, I think it was kind of like, hey, can't we just go to the Bahamas and have fun? I mean, it's like, yeah, clearly Cal is annoyed, I mean, and I think it's about more than the practice facility, quite honestly. I think it's about he hears some of the whispers and the Kentucky needs to do better, and some of the what I would consider to be nonsense about like his job may be in trouble. Like, hey, if there's anybody who can handle that job and the pressures of that job any better than John Calipari, please let me know. But so I think it was just the frustration of all of that, and as if to say like, hey, you have these high expectations, but the support needs to be equivalent to that and not just beyond the personal brand that I'm building. So, but I thought there was a lot of collateral damage to make his point. And I think that part had to, and who knows what the internal politics are like inside the department, but I just kind of thought it was unnecessary, I guess. But clearly he wants his practice facility.
Yes. The Kraft Center is 15 years old, so that's not ancient in facility years, but John did go out of his way to detail, like, we had to stop a practice recently because the roof was leaking. That shouldn't be happening at a place at like the University of Kentucky. I think his motivation was in the right place. I'll be honest. When I read the story, I was on a flight headed up here to New York, read the story, thought it was well done by Kyle. It was one of those moments where clearly he got John to just really start talking on the record. And, then he took the words and just relayed them to readers. I saw some fans like frustrated with Kyle. It's like, Kyle just asked questions. And trust me, when John Calipari says those types of things for public consumption, it's not you pulling it out of him. It's him using you to be able to say what he wants to say. That was very deliberate by John. He might, with the benefit of hindsight, want to take some of it back, maybe word it a little differently, but he did what he intended to do, which is put public pressure on the administration to get going on a new practice facility, which suggests to me he's clearly frustrated with the inaction. The point he was trying to make is, like, we've invested in football facilities, baseball facilities, track and field facilities, and I'm cool with all that. Like, I want everybody to do well. But this is the University of Kentucky. Basketball has always been the priority, and I don't feel like it's the priority right now. Why am I having to beg and push to get this thing done? Why am I the one? Like, do I have to do this by myself? Who else is championing these? That was actually a word he used for the men's basketball program besides me. It can't be just me. And so I think, his motivation was strictly to express frustration and hopefully push his administration in a certain direction. But while doing that, and though it didn't strike me as a shot at the football program when I read it initially, I honestly thought it was a shot at Mitch Barnhart, the athletic director, when I read it initially. I can, after Mark Stoops popped off the way he did, understand why that must be frustrating for Mark Stoops. Because, like, hey, man, if you want your practice to get your don't bring us into it and say,
Right.
and this is the part I think that bothered him. John Calipari said, Alabama, that's a football school. Yeah. Georgia, that's a football school. But Kentucky, come on, we're not a football school. We're a basketball school. And if you're Mark Stoops, you're going, hey, dude, we took this thing from a very bad place to 4 straight postseason wins, 4 straight bowl wins. We finished ranked in the top 20 of the AP poll. Maybe we're not actually competing for national championships, but we have got Kentucky football to an incredible place. And to have you, our basketball coach, tell the world, yeah, but we're not Alabama and we're not Georgia. So, like, let's stop. Come on. That was insulting to us and all the hard work we've done. I get it. It didn't strike me that way, and I don't think John meant it that way. But if you're Mark Stoops or somebody who's got real, sweat equity in that program, I can get why you might not like, or why you definitely don't like, your basketball coach saying what he said.
Well, not only that, but whether Cal meant to do it or not, he just armed everybody that Mark Stoops is recruiting against. Right. That clip was sent to everybody that Kentucky football is recruiting. Like, hey, their school doesn't even think they're a football school. Like, this isn't meant to last. So I don't know the internal politics. That's what I think is fascinating. I'd be curious, like, if your sources or in the conversation you had with Kyle, if there was any, what the discussion was around the relationship of those two head coaches prior to this story. Because to your point, I don't think Cal does much of anything by accident. The perception that somebody tricked him or that it was taken out of context, like, nobody understands how to play this game better than Cal does.
That's right.
So it's like, to me, I'm fascinated by that dynamic. It's either one of two things in my mind. It's either like, hey, there was a little bit of tension before this happened, and, this is just kind of bringing that to the forefront. Or it's that Cal didn't think that it would be received quite as negatively by the football program. And to your point, maybe given the opportunity just to reword some things a little bit differently the second time around, he would do that. But again, I'm just generally of the opinion that somebody like Cal is very deliberate and very strategic with exactly what comes out of his mouth, exactly when it comes out of his mouth. Because it's, in terms of like the marketing, the branding, the salesmanship of college basketball, nobody does that better than John Calipari. So I just have a hard time believing, like, I didn't mean it. Like, I don't know. I mean, no. He's pretty good at what he does.
I've never met, and I think I mean this generally speaking in life, not just among basketball coaches, a more intentional and deliberate talker and a more convincing talker. I get why he's great in living rooms with recruits. As I think most people know, I was his beat writer for 4 years at the Commercial Appeal when he was at Memphis. And when he wanted to talk about something, he would talk about it, regardless of whether you were interested in it or not. I remember one time I went with him. He was going up to Bristol to ESPN. It was like Memphis had no games during the week. And so they had, like, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday with no games. And they invited him up to come be in studio for, in studio analyst, halftimes, pregame, postgame, that kind of stuff on ESPN. And the whole flight up, he's like going over grade point average stuff and graduation rates about his program, about Bob Huggins' program at Cincinnati, in a complimentary way, because he'd clearly been bothered by people saying, Cincinnati doesn't, that Cincinnati in that league doesn't care about academics. Memphis in that league doesn't care about academics. So he was armed with all these statistics. And at some point I was like, so are they asking you about grade point average and graduation rates tonight? Is that what you're going to talk about? He said, I don't care if they ask me about it. I'm going to talk about it. Like, he is. So this was, I bet you very similar in the sense that he knew when he woke up yesterday, he was going to give Kyle the words to build a story that would put public pressure on his administration, to get a practice facility done, or at the very least, show his fans and the world how frustrated he is that he can't get this stuff done. I can remember just another quick story. There was one time where the Sixers job was going to open, or it had opened. And keep in mind, this is a million years ago. And he knew, this is like back when they had the Best Damn Sports Show or something like that. Was that a thing? And Stephen A. Smith who was rooted in Philadelphia, was going to go on that show and say that he believes John Calipari should be the next head coach of the Philadelphia 76ers. John knew this in the afternoon. My understanding is that John had already had a conversation with the Sixers, and they had more or less told him, hey, we love you, but we're going in a different direction. Like, we're not going to hire you. So he understands he's not getting the job. He also knows Stephen A. Smith is about to go on television and say he should get the job. So I'm literally talking to John in the afternoon, and he says, hey, just tonight, listen, this thing's going to happen. Stephen A. Smith's going to go on television and say I should be the next head coach of the Sixers. Call me after that, because I want to kill that as quickly as possible. Now, he could have just told Stephen A., hey, I'm not, I'm not. He wanted Stephen A. to say that on TV, and then he wanted to come out and say, I am not a candidate for the Philadelphia job. Memphis is where I want to be. Because
did he get an extension out of that?
Probably. But what he got more than anything else was Memphis fans going, can you believe our coach turned down the Philadelphia 76ers?
Right.
He didn't turn down the Philadelphia 76ers, but that was the impression that it kind of made. Like, God, Stephen A. Smith says John should be the coach of the Sixers, and John immediately says, I don't want to be the coach of the Sixers.
Right.
And so that makes your fans go, woohoo, we love him. He'll be here forever. You know how that story ended. So he's very good at getting accomplished what he wants to get accomplished. I think while doing it this time, he just, like you said, created some collateral damage with the football program. And I bet if he could reword that part of it, he probably would.
But you know what? Here, I offered this as a different philosophy. You mentioned Bob Huggins. Where'd Oscar Tshiebwe come from?
There you go.
How did that recruitment go? Sometimes collateral damage is a necessity for the goal they have to achieve. And it's got to be this kind of like ends justify the means mentality to get what they need to get. And I think when you're in a position like that, you've got to figure out how to get done what you need to get done. And so I just wonder, what was it? Is it like, hey, I don't, there's some sort of bad blood behind the scenes? Or was it like, I got to do this to get what I need, because it's, I think we've seen, again, with the Huggins reference, I think we've seen some of that in the past too. Like, what's got to be done has got to be done. My program comes first.
The other interesting thing to me is that the Kentucky football coach, we've reached a moment in time where the Kentucky football coach is emboldened enough to publicly come at the Kentucky basketball coach, which is not something I think you could have imagined 5 years ago, 10 years ago. John has always been the most powerful person on his campus. It was true at UMass. At Memphis, he did whatever he wanted. Like, if he would have ever just woke up one day and went to the president and said, I want a new athletic director, they would have had a new athletic director like that. He had the power to do whatever he wanted to do. And I think that's largely been true at Kentucky for most of his career. And rightfully so. He's done, broadly speaking, amazing things there. But now, you just sort of connect some dots here. He so clearly badly wants a new practice facility, and he's so obviously not getting anywhere with it. He's either being ignored or pushed back on, which must be, I guarantee you, John Calipari thinks privately, I'm running the biggest basketball program, or at least one of them, in the entire country. If I say I need a new practice facility, I should get a new practice facility. If you're going to spend $200 million on a football practice facility, you can spend 40 on a new basketball facility. Don't ever forget, this is Big Blue Nation. Right. I guarantee you he feels that way. He should be able to just say that and get it done, but it's clearly not happening. And when you combine that with whether it's real job pressure or not, he is under pressure from his fan base, because in that 2020-21 season, they went 9-16, missed the NCAA tournament. Then comes back last season. They were really good, but lost to St. Peter's in the first round of the NCAA tournament. When you back that bad season with that bad ending, the fans really do start to question. And I don't think it's helped with Bill Self getting his second national title, John still being stuck on one, despite having these incredible recruiting classes basically every year. I think the fans are not as, and I could just by doing Twitter searches, I can see this. They're not as enamored with him as they once were. They don't worship the way they once did. And I think the football coach being emboldened enough to pop off at John Calipari. I think there's a time, this is my point, where if John said exactly what he said, the Kentucky football coach would just be like, I don't like that, but I'm not going to pop off publicly at John Calipari on Twitter.
Right.
But yesterday, Mark Stoops felt emboldened enough to do it. And I gather most Kentucky fans seem to side with Mark Stoops on this issue, which, again, it's just must be a weird place for John to find himself in.
So two things about that. I think the thing, and these are things that I've written about in recent months, is one, the other thing that's correlated to those results on the floor that you've seen is even on the recruiting front, there's been a subtle deviation from the one and done strategy that he was championing for so long when he got there. It was all about, and he was really hanging his hat on that. It's about, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but he just came out and said, it's about getting guys to the NBA. That's our top priority, almost to the point of hey, winning national championships is secondary.
Well, most famously, one of the things he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it was after they had they set a record for first round draft picks or something like that. They maybe had 5 or whatever the number was. And on the telecast of the NBA draft, he said, this is either one of the greatest nights in Kentucky basketball history or the greatest night in Kentucky basketball history. It was something like that. And Kentucky fans got really bothered by that because it's no, the greatest nights involve us winning national championships. The draft should be secondary, but John is forever recruited for the draft. And so he's pumping that up, I think, to the frustration sometimes to his fan base.
So here's what I thought was ironic about last year's team. The thing that makes the NCAA tournament so magical is the potential for upsets and the unexpected to happen. Well, by the numbers, the metrics of their offensive and defensive efficiency, Kentucky had one of their best years last year in a long, long time. I don't remember the exact numbers right off the top of my head, but I did a story about this a few months ago, just in terms of it was their best defensive team. Their defense has long been a staple of their program. It was exceptional last year. Offensively, it was one of their best teams in a long, long time. In my opinion, there was arguably less NBA talent on that team than we've seen in a long, long time. So it was kind of an inverted correlation, if you will. And I think we've seen kind of a little bit of a strategic pivot in the way in which they've recruited in terms of now starting to emphasize transfers. Oscar Tshiebwe is not a great NBA prospect. He's just not. He's going to be he was college basketball player of the year last year. He's got a chance to be the most dominant big man in the game again this year. But he's also not unique in that he's one of a handful of guys, including Armando Bacot, Hunter Dickinson, some other guys who say, you know what, we fit the college game better than we do the NBA game. And because of NIL, maybe we've got a chance to even profit more here than we do in the NBA game. So we're going to stay here for now. But we're not really sure how we fit up at that next level because we're kind of like the Jahlil Okafor type. You know what I mean? Just not sure how it's going to work in the modern day NBA. There's hasn't been quite as much to get excited about on the recruiting front as well, especially, and then you throw the Shaedon Sharpe thing on top of it.
Right.
So all of it's a little bit of a snowball effect where they don't have the same amount of one and dones. The Kentucky fan base is just like you said about Twitter. I can tell you this from on some of our team sites, the response to, they don't even consider Shaedon Sharpe like a Kentucky product. It's hey, he didn't play here. He's not one of ours. So I think there is some frustration there, but the ironic thing to me is I thought as a basketball team last year, the NCAA tournament is not, it's the most exciting thing in sports, but it's not a great barometer of who is actually the best basketball team, because what makes it so exciting is the fact that it defies the odds. because of the small sample size of just one game at a time. So they lost that game. Their fan base is livid because of it. But last year was actually a very good Kentucky team.
There's no doubt. Like I think so much emphasis is put on how your season ends. Like there are mediocre teams that go to the Final Four, and people go, "We had a great season." Yeah, you had a great 2 weeks. Yeah, not really a great season. And then there are great teams that lose in the round of 64. Virginia famously to a 16 seed. It's like, it's like, Virginia had an amazing season that ended incredibly poorly.
Right.
And Kentucky last season was really good. And then they just, credit to St. Peter's. St. Peter's didn't just beat Kentucky and get blasted in the next round. Like St. Peter's won some games. But if you're Kentucky, and you're John Calipari and you haven't been to the Final Four since 2015, you can't lose that game. Not with that. That fan base is the best thing you could have when things are going well. But boy, when they're not, it can get really, really uncomfortable. And that's why, like I said, I don't think John Calipari is really going to get fired if he has a bad season.
Who are they going to get?
Who are they going to get? Like he's, even if things haven't gone as well as Kentucky fans would want them to go in recent years, and the one national championship, as wild as that is to say, having just one national championship is a negative with him. Not going to the Final Four since 2015 is a negative. I still don't think anybody can do that job as well as he can do that job. And oh, by the way, if you actually wanted to hire somebody else, you got to pay him like $1 billion, and then you got to go pay the new coach another $1 billion. Like the smarter thing is probably just ride this thing out with John Calipari until he doesn't want to do it anymore, until it gets so bad that you have no choice. But I just don't think we're going to get there. Like I think he's under Twitter pressure. Yeah. I think he's under message board pressure. I don't know that he's actually under real job pressure. And I think the most likely scenario this season is that they're really good again. That they're really good and they don't get upset by Peacocks in the first round of the NCAA tournament. I think if we're talking in April, there's a chance, he's just made the Final Four again, maybe won his second national title. Like the team on paper is really good. But if they do get off to a rough start or have a rough season for whatever reason that sometimes happens, it'll get real nasty real quickly because, I've noticed it. Even, John is pretty active on Twitter and, he'll share his thoughts on different things all the time. And there was a time, no matter what he tweeted, like the Kentucky fans would back it up, like no matter what it was. Like if he jumped on Twitter and said, I think live golf is the best thing that's ever happened to sport, they'd be like, yeah, we love Saudi Arabia. Like whatever he said, they were down with it. Now I see them push back on him when he makes certain comments. And that's not always been the way it's been. And if this season doesn't go well, it'll, he might need to, delete the Twitter app from his phone, because otherwise he'll be seeing a lot of things that, it'll turn badly quickly if this season doesn't start well or go well.
But if it does go well, all of this will be forgotten, and it'll be the approval ratings will be back up over 90% again.
That's exactly right. And my guess is based on, and I'd get your thoughts on this, and then we'll move on. My guess is they're going to be good, like I said. But these newcomers better than I do, Casey Wallace. Like, what kind of impact is a guy like that and the other first-year players? What kind of impact are they going to have on this team this season?
Casey Wallace is a old soul, if you will. He's not your typical freshman point guard because of the toughness and the maturity that he brings to the floor. He's also not your prototypical John Wall, De'Aaron Fox, just a lightning bolt up the court kind of guy. So it's going to be he's going to be reliable, but not, in my opinion, quite as dynamic as some of those guards you've seen in the past. I think this is going to be a Kentucky team that is going to continue to play kind of that smash mouth style that you really have to play with Oscar Tshiebwe in there. And it's going to be about deep. I mean, let's face it, from a basketball standpoint, from a coaching standpoint, John Calipari is known for the recruiting, but if you go back and study the metrics of his teams from an offensive and defensive perspective, he's a defensive coach. Yes. I mean, they are always good defensively. And a subplot of all of this And not to go off on a tangent here, but notice the way the game was officiated last year. Remember when freedom of movement was a thing? Well, now that some of these like big name college coaches, the North Carolinas, the Kentuckys, last year was Illinois. Now that they've got these bruising big men in here, they're campaigning not necessarily for what's best for the long-term aesthetics of the game in terms of freedom of movement, more offense, more points, yada, yada, yada. But in terms of like, hey, how do I win the most games now? And if you look at the way the game was officiated last year, I mean, it's very clear by the numbers. We went back to a very physical, a lot of contact, and that is in the best interest of teams like Kentucky and teams who play with that kind of bruising center. So I think that's the type of game you were going to see at Kentucky next year. I think Case and Wallace fits right into that. Livingston, some of those other freshmen, they're very good. They're going to be capable of playing and starting right away. But from a physical perspective, they're going to be able to step right in and play a physical style that is going to yield itself to that. So that is what I expect to see. I expect to see a defensive-oriented team who's a very good rebounding team, who will be opportunistic in transition, but whose identity is going to be built on the defensive end of the floor. And if they have a vulnerability, it's going to be, maybe a finer, a slimmer margin of error on the offensive end of the court.